Come here! Let's go. Give me a flipper.
All right. Welcome to the 41st episode of Amateur Hour. By the way, 41 is the number that George H.W. Bush was of presidenting.
He was of presidenting, yes, at that point of HW.
We're here on Amateur Hour with Troy.
Hey.
And me. And we're going to talk about the things that happened in Week 8 of flag football, and then in Week 9 of flag football, and then what might happen in the playoffs. If you guys are still in this with me, let's see, a minute into this podcast, please stay tuned to the second mostly portion of the podcast when we will interview Greg Kerr from The News.
KFDM Channel 6, KBTV Channel 4. It's probably our best segment of podcasting we've ever done. We may win an award for this segment.
It's the best thing Troy and I have ever done, even outside of podcasting.
Ever.
I have a kid and 2 different marriages. Best thing I've ever done.
I have a wife, and we've scored many touchdowns in flag football.
Greg Kerr's the best thing we've ever done.
Can't wait. You're going to love it.
Yeah. So
let's talk about football, though.
All right. First off, though, flag football, Week 8. We only had a couple of games that actually happened. The 10 a.m. game was 409 Boys versus GVNG. It came out really close at first, but 409 Boys ended up winning 31-14. Troy, what do you think about that game?
I thought it was a very good game early. 409 Boys, pulled away at the end, but which shows they're the 2 seed. But I thought GVNG gave them a good game early on. It's just one of those games where little mistakes add up, and the 409 Boys did not make those little mistakes.
That's correct. And the other game that week that actually occurred, because the rest were some sort of forfeits, losses, and wins.
The Herd got a win, and the Valve got a win, and the Storm got a win.
And the Storm got a win. But the other game that was notable that week was the Showstoppers playing the Expendables, in which was like an awesome game. If you missed it, you suck.
It was very good. The Expendables really had a chance to win that game. Showstoppers got to win 13-12.
Man, and it was a late stop in that game where Josh Hall actually caught a pass for the Expendables and was stopped at like the 3-yard line.
Yeah, it was close.
Right before he scored a touchdown for the Showstoppers to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game where you wouldn't expect the Showstoppers to be in such a close game with the Expendables, but Showstoppers not having Jake at quarterback, that seems to be their kryptonite, is not having their quarterback. I mean, every team is like that. If you don't have your quarterback, you can't win. But they didn't have Jake. They ended up having Cunningham playing quarterback, and they did just enough to win, scored an extra point. Expendables missed both of their extra points, and that was the difference. Expendables had some late plays getting down deep into the red zone, but just couldn't win, couldn't score at the end. And Showstoppers got the win to stay undefeated on the season at 8-0. Yeah, 8-0.
Yeah, 8-0. Man, that was a really good job of what you did right there.
I was extending that until you got off the phone as far as I could.
I had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, so let's look ahead to Week 9. In Week 9, the 409 Boys are going to get a win because they're playing a team that no longer exists because they were too salty. And just like in the Bible, they turned into salt pillars or something. And
too much salt to play flag football.
Right.
Of all the flavors, you chose to be salty.
And then look, in the 11 a.m. game, Team New Balance is going to play the Valve. If New Balance shows up, they're going to win, right?
And this is a game where if Team New Balance wins, they're in the playoffs. If the Valve wins, they're in the playoffs. This is a pretty intense game, actually. I mean, I feel like Team New Balance is better than the Valve, but
who knows who's going to show up?
As they say, any given Sunday.
Yeah, any given Sunday.
Team New Balance took a forfeit or took a loss last week because they didn't have enough people show up.
Correct.
That could very well happen this week.
It could very well. Now they're
which is annoying as all shit.
Yep. Now in the 12 p.m. game, the Showstoppers are taking on GVNG. Let's say Showstoppers show up minus Jacob Diltz. It's a good game, right?
GVNG could win that game, and if they do, that could propel them from the They're in the 4 seed right now. If that could possibly move them from the 4 to the 3 seed.
It could.
Very possible. But let's see what else happens.
All right. Now, in the 1 p.m. game, the Herd plays the Expendables, and will probably be the game of the week.
Yes.
So the Expendables have been playing everyone close and almost winning the game. This could be their week. And the Herd is old and fat and can't move.
And is the 3rd seed right now.
Third seed.
The Herd has done very well of getting wins where they need to. The only 2 teams they've lost to are the 2 teams ahead of them. And so I think the Herd has a little bit of the advantage, but the Expendables are one of those teams that can beat anybody at any given time.
Right. And then the last game of the day is supposed to be the Storm Prestige Worldwide. Prestige Worldwide won't show up, so the Storm will get a win. It's virtually impossible for the Storm to make the playoffs at this point, so that is
unless some other teams forfeit.
Correct. So, we'll see what happens. The playoffs are going to happen on May 19th, which is the week after Mother's Day.
We're taking Mother's Day off. God bless all mothers. Without mothers, we wouldn't be here playing flag football.
Exactly. But most important for this weekend, at noon on May the 5th, Sunday, we will have the fastest 40-yard dash challenge. So show up for the fastest 40-yard dash.
40-yard dash, and then the big man 40-yard dash.
The big man 40-yard dash.
You have to be 250 and above to run the 40-yard dash in the big man 40-yard dash.
250 and over, get to play in the fastest big man 50. Fastest big man 40. And for
50,
all
the 50, the big man has to run a 50.
We won't make them run a 50. But for all those of you other folk that want to run in the 40-yard dash, it's
so Walt, I can't wait to see you run in the big man 40-yard dash.
Exactly. So let's you guys show up at noon. We'll see what happens, and we'll have a good time. I have some medals made for you for whoever wins. And look, guys, we have the best amateur hour segment ever. That's after this.
It's fantastic. It covers every gamut of topic, from sports to presidential actions.
Yes.
Not current presidents, but
yes. We're going to talk to
history of presidents.
We're going to talk to Greg Kerr from KFDM News next. And Greg has the best information about the best things ever. He's got so many good sports stories and so many good just life stories. Y'all will love it. Please stay tuned and listen to Greg Kerr talk about anything he wants to talk about for the next 30 minutes. It's awesome. If you're in your car, take a longer trip. If you're in your house, fold more clothes or do whatever you're doing more. But listen to Greg Kerr. The man is a genius.
As they say on 70s and 80s FM or AM radio, turn it in or rip the knob off.
They don't give an option or rip the knob off. They say turn it in and rip the knob off.
Yes.
Okay, we ruin this. Just
listen to
Greg Kerr. All right, have a good day. Do a very special amateur hour today. We have a guest that some of you may have heard of. It's Greg Kerr. Greg, say hi.
Great to be here. We've had a little pre-podcast chat. It's been more fun than I bargained for, I tell you that for sure.
Well, excellent, Greg. I'm glad we're at least semi-interesting. I know that you've been a newscaster here forever, and you were a newscaster everywhere else forever. So I'll just start by saying, are you happy to be back?
Happy to be back. I really am, Cody. It's been a good run.
When we say forever, he doesn't mean forever like you're 100 years old or something. Just you've been around. You know the world of broadcasting.
Yeah, 35 years in the industry. Started out in San Angelo, went to Austin, came to Beaumont. All this time I was doing sports. Left Beaumont, went to Illinois, Oklahoma City, Greensboro, North Carolina, back to Dallas, Austin, and back to Beaumont.
Okay, Greg, so you like to deal with sports, though, right?
Oh, yes.
Sports is where you started.
Sports is my passion.
Okay,
it really is.
When you first started with sports, what were you most excited to cover?
I played college basketball, so basketball's kind of always been in my blood. Football is probably my favorite sport. Flag football.
Oh yeah, man, flag football is great.
It's funny I should mention that, right?
Yeah, it's such a good sport.
I love flag football.
Yeah. Greg, is Southeast Texas Flag Football League not your favorite flag football league?
I've come to see a few leagues in my career, and that would be not one of them.
Oh yeah,
because I haven't seen it.
It's better than the tough league, correct?
Yes,
okay.
Definitely so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He knows what's going on.
No, I covered a bunch of stuff during the course of my career, and it's hard to really say one thing. You're talking about maybe a favorite event?
I'm talking about if you're, a young or any age broadcaster, like what really surprised you and opened your eyes to like you felt like you were just really in the moment when you were covering it.
It's kind of a blooper. It's kind of an
Okay,
embarrassment.
go ahead.
I started in radio at North Texas, back then North Texas State. It's my third year in college. I'd gone to JC the first 2 years. And so we had press passes for the Dallas Mavericks. First year in existence, 80-81. And so I'm sitting on press row, and a guy next to me is drawing up diagrams on an NBA board of some kind. So I'm so curious. It's like I know who this guy is, but I can't pinpoint it. Finally, I just go, and I'm a 21-year-old punk. And I said, "Do you mind if I ask you what you do?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure. I'm Del Harris, the head coach of the Houston Rockets."
Oh my God!
And I'm going, "Okay." Then he goes, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a cub reporter at KNTU at North Texas." I was so embarrassed. He was as nice as could be. And growing up, one of my favorite players was a guy named Rick Barry.
Danny Rickberry, you said?
Rick Barry.
Okay.
He was one of the great shooters of all time. Played for the Warriors in the NBA. In fact, finished his career in Houston his last 2 years.
Had the granny shot.
Had the
free throw.
Yeah, granny free throw shooter, 90% for his career. I mean, he was the greatest free throw shooter of all time. Anyway, and so I admired this guy, but I knew he was kind of a punk. And I said, "Hey, do you mind if I ask you, what was Rick Barry like?" Because Dell coached him his last season, I think. He goes, "Well, I'll tell you this. He was probably the biggest turd I ever met." I go, "Oh, man.
That's awesome.
Sometimes it's better not to know,
Yeah.
But that was really kind of an embarrassing moment to begin my career.
Okay, yeah.
Had a few in those in my career, but, luckily then kind of few and far between.
Okay, so I know you went to Oklahoma for a while. How was that?
I went to my last 2 years of college was in Oklahoma, Central Oklahoma. And played basketball there and got into the broadcasting department there. And it was nice. And I went back for 2 years working at the CBS affiliate in Oklahoma City, and really enjoyed that. I liked Oklahoma. It was fine. Really did.
Yeah. So you said you went to Dallas Carter High School from
Yes.
South Oak Cliff, but then you said you went to Central Oklahoma to play basketball.
The first 2 years I played basketball at Weatherford College
Okay.
outside Fort Worth.
Yes.
And then I retired kind of and went to North Texas because I thought, I'm not going to play in the NBA. I'm not good enough for that. And so I got my broadcasting thing going, got my grade point average up a little bit. And then I tried out for Central Oklahoma, got a scholarship, and went there and played 2 years.
Awesome.
So I squeezed 4 years into 5. 3 schools, changed a major, played basketball.
Okay.
That's what you do.
So you met a lot of probably pretty popular athletes over the years, right? And pretty famous people.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have one that sticks out in your mind as not the best, but the most interesting athlete-type person you've met, or at least talked to?
Well, as a kid, I always not idolized. I guess that's not the word. But every kid, when I was a kid, wanted to be Johnny Unitas, who was the famous Baltimore Colt.
Yeah.
And I interviewed him in 2000 or so. He was in Oklahoma City for a function. And I interviewed him and talked to him. He was as nice as could be. So that's something that really stands out for me. I got to be pretty good friends with a guy named Toady Smith. And for people in Beaumont, they might remember him. His brother was Bubba Smith, the Willie Ray Smith Awards. So that was the kids were Bubba and Toady and Willie Ray Jr. And when I used to live here years ago, I got to be pretty good friends with him. And one year we were out at Cowboy Camp in Thousand Oaks, where they used to have it in California. So I called Toady up. I knew he was from Beaumont, and I wanted to do a story on him, kind of a where is he now type thing, where are they now? Went to his house, and we're talking, and he goes, hey, and this is way before you guys' time. You may not know who this is, but, hey, you want me to call up Dwayne Thomas and have him come over here? Well, Dwayne Thomas was a Cowboy running back in the early 70s who gave off this aura of being kind of a black militant, which is a kind of, you put it that way because that's the aura that he put off.
Right.
And I said, man, I think he's kind of he's not very friendly, is he? He goes, no, he's a great guy. And Dwayne came over. In fact, he and Tom Landry used to go rounds. In fact, Toady Smith had some stories about Tom Landry, too. They were kind of interesting. He's old cowboy. I love the old stories of history. But anyway, Dwayne came over, and we hung out until about 2 or 3 in the morning. And they had all great stories and just loved hearing that stuff. And Dwayne was a nice guy. But he admitted to the fact he wanted to come off like that so he wouldn't have to mess with the media in Dallas at the time. So nobody wanted to talk to him.
Right, just like some of the NBA players and NFL players now, they want to come off as a bad guy. Like,
And they do that for a reason.
Do you have, speaking of like current sports, do you have a current team you follow in basketball that you really like?
I'm a Celtic fan. Have been a Celtic fan since 1973 probably. Days of John Havlicek and Dave Cowens and those guys.
Havlicek just having passed away recently. That's kind of a big thing. That's a legend.
I know.
Of Boston Celtics lore.
I love John Havlicek. You never heard anything about that guy off the court.
Yeah.
But you know that he was one of the great players of all time.
Havlicek stole the ball.
That's right.
Probably the biggest, the most known basketball play in NBA history. If you really looked at it, it probably is.
1965 against Philadelphia.
Yep.
And Havlicek was just a quiet guy that got the job done and played for 19 years or so, 18 years, and he was a special guy for sure.
And with me and Cody, we were on the very back end of seeing Larry Bird play. He was right at the end of his career in the mid '90s or early '90s when we saw him play. What was that like watching Larry Bird play for the Celtics?
Well, real quick trivia on John Havlicek. He was drafted by the Cleveland Browns.
Really?
Out of Ohio State.
Did not know that.
I think he played a couple of exhibition games, and actually I think he scored a touchdown. And then realized that basketball was he was a receiver.
Yeah.
He didn't play in college, but they drafted him.
Huh.
And anyway, scored a touchdown, then realized basketball was a sport and quit.
Yeah.
Larry Bird to me is, and I'll say it outright, I think he's the greatest player ever. Michael Jordan was certainly fantastic, but if you put pure basketball ability, Bird was, okay, if you're going to give Jordan the number 1 spot, you give Bird 1A.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's
agree.
the rest.
Yeah.
Go home and look on YouTube and see what this guy did.
Yeah.
There's Larry Bird stuff all over the place.
Yeah, and I heard so many times where he would tell stories of when they would have, this is going to sound kind of bad, but he would have a white guy guard him, and he would say, he would get offended when he would have a white guy guard him, like, no, I'm going to kill you.
It's true.
He would get offended by having some white guy guard. It was great. I heard that conversation. I was like, it's fantastic.
And I'm telling you, white or black, he'd use them all up.
Oh, yeah.
And after one of the playoff series, I think it was with Detroit,
where he was getting clotheslined to death and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Dennis Rodman badmouthed him.
Yeah.
And then Isaiah Thomas said something like, if he weren't a white guy, he'd be just another guy.
Yeah.
Which was BS.
Exactly.
And they had to have a press conference, and Isaiah had to apologize. And Bird didn't want to be there, apparently. Yeah. And he just said, I don't care. I just go out there and play. There was a guy named Gene Banks that played at Duke back in the late 70s, played for the Bulls and the Spurs. And I got to know him pretty well when I lived out in Greensboro. And we'd hang out every now and then. He said that it was the 86 playoffs. Bird had a 24 points, something in a game. And so after the game, they were asking Gene what he did to stop Bird. He goes, I'm not getting into all that. I didn't do anything. It is what it is. So he said next game they come out, they're getting ready to jump the ball. Bird looked at him, he goes, I'm going to bust your ass tonight. He said Bird went for like 36 or something.
Of course, yeah. Couldn't stop him.
So that is a great story. And it's funny, a buddy, I didn't even know him now, he's a tennis pro that was from Beaumont. And this was 1989. It was the year that Bird sat out all but 6 games because he had heel issues, so he had surgery. So Bird wasn't playing. But anyway, this guy was a tennis pro up in Boston. I said, and I interviewed him here. I said, one of my dreams is to go to the Boston Garden. I'm a Celtic fan. He goes, well, I think I can help you out. Next thing I know, he's got me 2 tickets to go to a Celtic game on a Sunday night against Seattle. So I got my brother who lives up in Dallas, and we flew to Boston, and we're hanging out one night. So we're sitting in this bar, and it's like if you've been in bars in Austin, very narrow, kind of back. And we're talking to these girls, right? And so this girl I'm talking to right here, she looks over my and she goes, oh, my God, there's Larry Bird. And I look around, there goes Bird walking by, had a Budweiser in his hand. He's going to take care of some business, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it was like, because Bird is, like I said, besides Pete Maravich, he's my favorite player ever.
Yeah.
And I was 29 at the time. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. It was like when you're in high school, you see the good-looking girl walk by going, oh, my God. Anyway, so he walks back.
Hero, yeah.
And he's sitting with his trainer. And so the trainer comes up to the girls and, hey, you guys want to hang out with me and Larry? They're going, oh, no, if we want to let our 2 friends come along, that'd be, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So they went back and forth, and finally I went up to Bird, and I don't do things like, show my hand of admiring someone. Yeah. I just walked up to him and said, hey, I enjoy watching you play. He goes, yeah, thank you. Didn't get an autograph, anything like that, but I said my piece, and I moved on. I was like, that was Larry Bird, man. That's pretty dang cool.
And Larry, probably the best basketball nickname ever, the Hick from French Lick.
Yeah.
That's
and you think about that. He was recruited by Indiana, lasted 6 weeks. Here's some food for thought. He lasted 6 weeks. It was too much for him. It wasn't about basketball. I think he just felt uncomfortable there. He leaves, goes back home to French Lick. He's a garbage man, sanitation department, playing pickup games. Indiana State comes around. They try to talk him into playing there, and he didn't want to. Yeah. He was just happy making some money and playing ball. Winds up going to Indiana State, and, of course, the rest is history. But my question is this. Had he played for Bobby Knight all 4 years, what kind of player would he have been?
Yeah, he would have been a robot, right?
Yeah, he would have been. He would not have been the Bird that I think that we saw. As talented as that guy was, I don't think he would have been given the flexibility to create the type of game personality that he had. That's my opinion.
Yeah, not every system's right for the same guy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's
so,
not.
Greg, you still like basketball, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. NBA playoffs are going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you like right now in the NBA?
Out of the East, I still kind of like Milwaukee. Okay. I think the Celtics now have the home court because they won one in Game 1 in Milwaukee.
Right.
It's a tough matchup for Boston. Really, Milwaukee should have beaten them last year. Philadelphia, I think, is still
too young.
Jekyll and Jekyll.
Yeah.
You can't figure it out.
They've got some talent on that
A
team.
lot of talent.
Embiid was impressive.
Yeah, and he is impressive.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't know what you're going to get out of him.
Right.
I think Jimmy Butler's probably adds a little more veteran play to him. That helps him out.
And he's a scorer too, which helps. Toronto always seems to choke up.
Yeah, they've been young though, so I'm just wondering if this year they might come off with something.
Having Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, that's 2 championship performers that could help them. I don't know. I mean, like I said, they get nothing out of Kyle Lowry, so.
I know. He disappears in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I covered Danny Green in college when he was at North Carolina. I'm thinking this guy's never going to play in the league. And he's been in the league now forever.
That's
why I'm not a scout.
And I've been a Spurs fan since Duncan came to the Spurs. And Green for three. I mean, he was the shooter. That's all he could do was shoot threes.
That's exactly right. And that brings to mind one of my favorite players in the league, J.J. Redick.
Oh, man, I love J.J. Redick.
Yeah, covered him at Duke. He played for Duke. Nobody likes Duke. They gave him hell wherever he went just because he played for Duke. Yeah. But, man, that dude could shoot. He's one of my favorite college players of all time.
Real quick, I want to change subjects real quick before you go into the Western Conference. We had a guest on maybe 2 years ago. He's from North Carolina, big Duke fan. And he was telling us that Duke-NC rivalry, how big that is.
Oh,
you covered it. Tell me what it's like compared to anything around here. What's that rivalry like?
Well, back then, football-wise, Duke wasn't very good. So Carolina really wasn't that good either. Football is this whole different deal. But basketball, I covered 15 of those games at Carolina and at Duke. They're 8 miles away from each other, which in itself is pretty amazing. But going to games at Duke and Cameron Indoor is awesome. And it's not that big. It looks bigger on TV than it is like 9.5 or so.
The goals hanging from the ceiling. That's what's odd to me.
Yeah.
No stanchions, goals hanging from the ceiling.
Because there's no room for that. Because you'd block seats. It's and even because I did play-by-play for Elon University, which is down the road a little bit from Greensboro. We did a preseason IT game at Cameron, and they stick you up in this cage at the top of the arena hanging from the ceiling. That's where they put all the broadcasters that are doing the game.
So you guys are like literally in a cave.
In a bird's
awesome.
eye view of it, because you're looking down on the court. You're not courtside, you're on top.
Because when it was built, there weren't any broadcasters broadcasting Duke games when that was built.
Yeah, and there's just not enough room. There's really not. And I'm telling you, we would sit on press row, and you are squeezed in like this. And I always seem to get this seat where they had a vice grip on the table, right? And Sports Illustrated would put one of their cameras there. So I'm like trying to get around that. And I'm 6'2", which isn't easy. And you're cramped in, but it was just, I remember one time getting out. It was so loud against Carolina, I had to walk out. My brother was pretty cool because he's a huge sports fan too. And I brought him out to Carolina one year, and he got to go to the Duke-Florida State game at Cameron. And then that weekend, a few days later, he got to go to the Carolina-Duke game in Chapel Hill. So he got a taste of both. Yeah, and walking into Chapel Hill, you see all the banners up there of Jordan and Worthy and all the great players going back. And everything is Carolina blue or powder blue, however you want to see it. It's a big arena. It's like 16,000 people. It's almost double the size of Cameron, but it's really quite fascinating. It really is. Both campuses are beautiful. Yeah,
that's like nothing around here though that we would. I mean, it's obviously a much bigger rivalry than we would see.
Yeah, and all those campuses are beautiful out there. I covered 15 games and 8 ACC tournaments, but they never played each other in the tournament. It was always during the season. They never met up.
This year they played each other in the tournament for the first time ever.
Yeah, in a long time. Yeah.
All right, Greg, so we've done the Eastern Conference.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the Western Conference?
Well, as much as I hate to admit it, the Warriors look like the team unless Houston can figure out.
They look pretty good, right?
Maybe the best thing that ever happened to Houston was Harden getting his eyes poked out the other night.
I think that might be right.
And I say that lovingly, but when you have a guy who's dribbling, what do they say, 14 seconds of every 24-second shot clock? I'm sorry.
It's maddening.
It's hard to watch that kind of basketball. It's terrible.
You're not going to win a championship like that. It comes down to, and the old cliche is it's a team game, and it is.
Yeah.
So maybe Chris Paul will step up now. Maybe some of these other guys. They've got good, what's the term I'm looking for? Role players.
Yeah, they do have good role players.
If their starters were bench players, they'd be the best bench in the league, but they're not good starters.
Right. Yeah. And I like Chris Paul because I actually got to know him pretty well out in North Carolina because he went to Wake Forest, and he's from our area. That was in our viewing area. And there's an interesting story about him. In high school, he went to West Forsyth, and his his grandfather had been killed a little bit prior to the end of the season. And he was at the free throw. He'd scored 61 points in the game or something.
Wow.
And he was going to the free throw line for 62, but his grandfather was like 61 or so when he died. So as a tribute to his grandfather, he just dropped the ball and walked away.
Oh, man,
they took him out of the game.
Story.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
I mean, it's sad, but it's still amazing.
Yeah.
So you have the Warriors in that series, all right?
I've got the Warriors in that series. They got the home court advantage still.
All right.
Unless Houston can win 3 straight.
Yeah.
Denver and Portland, I don't even know what to make out of that series.
Exactly. I thought that same thing.
It'll go 7. I think.
It feels like the West is like the East used to be with LeBron in the East.
Yeah.
One team's going to win.
Yeah.
The others don't matter.
And I don't like the Warriors. I really don't.
So do you have a pick for the NBA champion this year? Do you have somebody that, like, if you had to pick somebody you thought was going to win the NBA championship, do you have a pick for it?
I don't think my Celtics are good enough. I hope they are. They were so inconsistent in the regular season, it was hard to kind of put a peg on them. right now I'd go with the Warriors and maybe
Warriors.
maybe the Celtics or the Bucks. I still think the Celtics are better than the Sixers.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It looked like Boston figured out how to defend Giannis. I mean, that's the thing. Antetokounmpo can, if you can, frustrate him. That's the one thing that gets him sometimes. I mean, he gets frustrated on the court.
It gets me that you can actually say his last name. That's impressive.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Let's call him the Greek Freak.
The Greek freak.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Giannis.
Exactly, yes. Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Oh, man, you're
That's
great,
impressive,
Troy.
man.
That's very good.
Hey.
Listen to way too much
Jeez.
ESPN radio during the day.
You have to buy his dinner or something right here.
He does, yes.
I only buy his dinner when we're out on real dates.
We'll buy your dinner too, Greg. Don't worry.
You are
Yeah.
good people. You
Yeah.
have to do all that.
But
But anyway, so I can see the Warriors coming out of the West, and hopefully the. Am I banging his chair or something? And,
Well, Greg,
and hopefully
you've got
the
something going on
Celtics out of the East, but probably the Bucks.
One question: what do you think of the Celtics' black uniforms they wear?
Don't like
I
them.
figured I knew that was coming.
Look, I'm a.
green and white guy.
I'm very much all about uniforms, and I don't like messing with tradition at all.
That's why you like the 49ers uniforms.
Yeah, that's right.
That
The-
classic.
Yeah, this is the red jersey. It's never been. Well, they messed with it for a couple of years.
This guy's a cowboy.
Look, the Cowboys haven't changed their logo in, I don't know, ever. So,
Yeah.
Cowboys are very traditional, Troy.
Well, I grew up in Dallas, and I'm not the biggest Cowboy fan because you can't like the Cowboys and the 49ers.
Of course,
like you can't
yeah.
like the Celtics and the Lakers.
That's true.
But anyway, that 60s and 70s blue jersey the Cowboys would wear, and they'd always lose in it. That's one of the
Yes.
great uniforms of all time. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It ranks almost up there with the Charger powder blue.
Oh, Greg, you and Troy, man,
Yeah.
y'all are like best friends. Yeah, y'all have the
So that's
same
they should go
lights.
back to that uniform. It's beautiful. Yeah. But that one from the 60s into the 70s, well, they changed it in the 70s. Yeah. But that powder blue is awesome. But, yeah, the Cowboy uniform is beautiful. I mean, it really was.
Well, I do like that Dallas, like through my lifetime, has had the same logo, same basic colors.
Yeah.
They haven't gone through some dramatic change because, I mean, honestly, it's hard to beat just a star.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Greg, before you go, I know you're a busy person. I'd like to ask.
No, I'm really
you,
not.
So you went from sports to news,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
First of all, was that a difficult change?
Yeah, it really was because I never really, for so many years you get locked into what you do.
Right.
I don't care what you do.
Oh, yeah.
You guys have your businesses that you do, and you don't really think outside your box a lot. But I came into a situation out in Greensboro, which, that was a great TV sports market out there.
Greensboro, North Carolina.
Greensboro,
right?
North
Okay.
Carolina. Market size 43 or whatever it is. When I went out there, not that I need to talk about this so much, but when I went out there were 4 of us in the sports department.
Yeah.
There was me, as sports director, a weekend sports guy, a sports reporter, and a sports photographer. When I left 9 years later as a budget cut, because they canned me and the news guy, it was me.
Yeah.
And a guy who filled in for me on weekends. So I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of the state of where sports is kind of going, because there was a lot of stations around the country that were dropping sports altogether, even in big markets.
Wow.
Phoenix, in one of the stations there, they dropped sports altogether.
Really? With all those
They got a lot-
with all those professional and college teams,
Yeah.
they drop. That makes no sense.
But they got public backlash, so they brought it back.
Oh, yeah. I bet, yeah.
So anyway, I just thought, well, maybe I'll try to reinvent myself. And I just really kind of did a crash course on judicial things and politics and whatever else that I needed to do to educate myself and kind of reteach things to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Not any questions.
Well,
right, Greg.
let's talk about one more thing. We talked about this kind of in our pre-game chat,
Okay.
pre-podcast chat. We can branch out from sports. What's your thoughts on the Kennedy assassination? What happened?
Oh, you want to talk about the Kennedy
Yeah.
assassination?
It was a conspiracy.
Exactly.
We did a podcast a long time ago about conspiracies, and he doesn't believe any conspiracies have ever happened.
Okay.
Tell them what I believe.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think of all the conspiracies that have happened, I think the Kennedy assassination was a government conspiracy. I do not think it was one guy shooting from the bookstore or whatever, the book depository
right.
up in the 6th floor.
Yeah.
I think this was triangulation of fire, and this was an assassination, not just one guy on a whim. I believe that.
Yes.
That's
All right. Cody, what do you think? All of a sudden, I'm leading the proceeding now.
Greg, you're doing a great job. Look, Greg, my friend here is ridiculous in all aspects of life, including this one. Look, CBS, I think, recreated the crying child, recreated the Kennedy assassination to a T with the same rifle that Lee Harvey Oswald used.
They can recreate it any way they want it to make look on TV.
Look, I know that you have a belief you want to have, but just like any other conspiracy theory, 99% of the time it's wrong. There's no aliens. Kennedy was assassinated by one crazy guy. I understand that you want Lee Harvey
back and to the left. Back and to the left.
It's on the JFK movie.
As a person who knows a thing or two about ballistics, that is exactly how I would expect the man's head to move. Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald and Lee Harvey Oswald alone.
Okay.
The end.
All right.
Well, look, Oliver Stone.
Well, Greg, what do you think? You were around that area. No, I mean, you weren't.
Good Lord, man. Greg's like 40.
You didn't do it. You didn't do it, obviously. But what do you think?
I was in the same town.
Go ahead, Greg.
It was interesting. Now that where Lee Harvey Oswald was living over in Oak Cliff, they're offering tours now of the boarding house where he used to live. Try to make a buck.
Yeah, of course.
My thought is it goes all the way back to the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
The CIA was trying to get Castro out of office in Cuba, correct?
That is correct, yes.
As the dictator there, the El Presidente. Yes. Now, who ran that island before Castro took over? Who did Castro run out of there?
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
That'd be called the Mafia.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
All right. So the Mafia owned Cuba, prostitution, everything else, right?
Right.
They were escorted out of there when the revolution happened. All right. So they were running guns down for the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy did what he did by not allowing support. So all these people were stranded, a lot of casualties, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that takes us back full circle to about 1962.
Right.
And 63. Oswald lived in Russia, right?
Right.
He comes back to America kind of unfeathered, had a Russian wife. FBI would check in on him occasionally. Why is that? It was during the Cold War. There was a reason. So, Oswald was connected to this, and it goes to New Orleans. All at the same time, back in the early 60s, the Kennedys were trying to run the mob out of business, especially RFK. All right? They vowed the mob to get Kennedy back. Not RFK,
and I've
but
heard that before
JFK.
because Jack Ruby was part of the mob, right?
Yes.
Okay.
He was a bit player.
Yeah.
He was sent down to Dallas from Chicago to run a strip operation and whatever else. Now, whether or not Ruby knew Oswald has always been up for conjecture. Some say, yeah, we saw them together in a meeting, whatever. There's no visual documentation. You guys following this? Yes.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
I'm on it, yeah.
I got it.
Oswald, went to high school in Fort Worth. Same high school as John Denver. You might remember him. Fort Worth, Arlington
Great.
Heights.
You are full of information. That's great. Okay.
Yeah, how about that?
So
Oswald got that Russian accent just from living in Russia.
Just from living in Russia. He was a Marxist. He didn't like the American way.
right.
So he was a Marine and wound up, I think he worked radar or something in Osaka, Japan. So the guy knew intelligence.
Right.
And he wasn't a dummy. Yeah. So he winds up living between New Orleans and Dallas, and he's going back and forth. He runs across David Ferry, who is another story. He was connected to Carlos Marcello, who was a head mafia guy in the Gulf Coast.
Got it.
All right?
Okay.
Marcello had been deported twice by Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General.
Okay.
left off in the jungles of Guatemala or
Right.
Honduras, one of the two. Of course, he vowed to get Kennedy back. So the mob saying was, to kill the dog, you don't cut off the tail. Who was the tail? Robert Kennedy.
Okay.
Who was the head?
Yes, Jack Kennedy.
JFK.
Okay, go ahead.
So that's where they knew to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Greg, I love this. This is really cool. Yeah, this is way better than that show where we just talked about flag football.
All right, so this whole thing was set up. Oswald winds up getting a job at the Texas School Book Depository, right?
Right.
Perfect plant. Now, who knew that Kennedy was going to come through Dallas at the time? Nobody did. But there were a lot of people trying to get Kennedy out of there. A lot of right-wing people who were, including one was Clint Murchison, who's Lamar Hunt's father.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs owner, his
Gotcha.
dad.
Yeah.
Was Hunt Oil, a lot of money in Dallas. They didn't like him. So all of this stuff comes full circle to Dallas. Kennedy arrives. They change the route. They're coming down Elm Street, down Main Street. They turn right to go onto Houston Street, and then another left onto Elm. That turn was illegal by Secret Service standards because they had to slow the car down too much.
Okay.
All right. There are so many things in between that
That didn't make any sense.
that
right?
that need to
Okay.
be caught up on. Anyway, so my tie-in is to the CIA and the mob.
Right.
The CIA and the mob. That's what I was trying to do. Tie in the CIA and the mob. CIA and the mob. Those two went in cahoots to get Castro out of office
Right.
because the mafia wanted the island back and the CIA wanted Castro out.
Right.
Okay? So here's another chance to do that again. Rogue members of the CIA wanted Kennedy done. The mob wanted him to pay him back.
Okay.
In the 1960 election, what was the difference in him being elected over Nixon?
Very, very, very minimal.
Cook County, Illinois.
One county. Wow.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Head of the Chicago mob, Sam Giancana.
Okay.
1978, 77, when the committee formed again to discuss the Kennedy assassination,
Right.
Giancana was to speak before the committee. They found him riddled with bullets around his mouth.
Yep.
And that's a mob sign of you don't talk.
You don't talk.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Johnny Roselli was another man who was supposed to talk before the committee,
Yeah.
another mob figure. They found him in a 55-gallon drum in Biscayne Bay, chopped up inside of it.
All right, Greg. So
Tell me if there seems to be some weird coincidences here.
Well, all I got was that I think John Denver killed President Kennedy. Is that what we talk? Is that what happened? That's what happened. John Denver.
Because he went to Fort Worth, Arlington Heights.
and then that airplane got complete revenge on him and crashed right into where.
You know what's
Was it-
funny
was it-
about
was
that?
it Clinton was a president, or was it Bush was president when he died, when Denver died? Someone.
Well,
got
that's a good
Denver.
question. There's some kind of weird. Yeah, you think they sabotaged his little experimental airplane?
Look.
Interesting though, on board Air Force One after Kennedy was killed, right? LBJ takes the oath of office, and you'll see pictures of Jack Brooks in the back,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Well, back in the mid '90s or so, Mr. Brooks came into the TV station, and I'm all thrown into this Kennedy assassination stuff. So I followed him. 'Cause I was doing sports back then, so I wasn't there because he was on the show that night at 10 o'clock.
yeah.
So he's walking out to the parking lot, and I followed him out. I said, Mr. Brooks, what do you think about this whole Lee Harvey Oswald? And he just ignored me and kept walking to the car.
Kept on going. Right.
Kept on going. I think Jack knew what happened, or Mr. Brooks knew what happened, and he took it with him to the grave because he
So
was
just to
LBJ's
summarize.
henchman.
Greg, you're saying the mob and the CIA had a plot to kill JFK, right?
Not the CIA necessarily. I think rogue members of the
but
CIA.
mostly the mob.
Yes.
Mostly the mafia had a plot to kill JFK.
Yeah.
So are you thinking that Lee Harvey Oswald was the trigger man, though, or do you think they had more people?
May have been one of them.
I think that Oswald never fired a shot.
Wow.
So you think Oswald never fired a shot and they had other people that were around
Yeah.
ready to go? Man, that is really interesting. Like,
This
that's
is
so
my
interesting
theory.
to me.
And it was completely covered up by the FBI. And the Warren Commission was however many volumes of cover-up.
Well,
And back in 1964 when that thing
it
came
would
out.
have been much easier to cover things up in 1964 than
absolutely.
it would be today.
Okay. And thinking about, you're talking about them being on Air Force One, one of the saddest pictures of American history is Lyndon B. Johnson being sworn in with Jacqueline Kennedy there covered in her husband's blood.
Yeah.
Which she probably knew her husband was a womanizer, whatever
Yeah,
he did.
she knew.
She probably knew that, but that was still her husband.
Yeah.
She's covered in his blood. He's in the hospital, and she's having to be there when he's being sworn in.
Right.
It's the saddest picture
Sure.
of American presidency.
And she
I
said,
think.
"I want to keep this on because I want them to see what
Yeah.
they did to my husband."
Yeah.
Now, that Friday night at the Dallas police station, Jack Ruby was prowling the hallways because he was buddies with the police department because he had a strip
Right.
joint, so he was very nice to them. He knew a lot of the reporters, and apparently the room where they were interrogating Oswald, which apparently there's no notes of that, which is crazy to even think,
Right.
that Ruby went up and jostled the door handle. And one of the reporters, Seth Canner, I think was his name, said, "Hey, Jack, what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, nothing." He just walked away. You can see in some of the camera angles of the hallway during this time that you can see Ruby going up and down the hallway. And then that night, they brought Oswald out at midnight for a press conference, which is
Right.
crazy. You would never do that now.
No, you wouldn't at all. No.
I mean, sometimes these perp walks, they talk.
Yeah,
But they brought
exactly.
him out for a press conference. But before they did that, the DA in Dallas said something about him being Oswald being a member of the Fair Play for Cubans or something like that, and a voice in the background corrected him. He said, "No, that's Fair Play for Cuba." Wow. And who it was Jack Ruby posing as a reporter with his glasses on and a notepad.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So you learn something new every day.
Look, Greg, you have really spurred my curiosity on this topic.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, I know you have stuff to do.
I appreciate
Just
that,
anything
yeah.
else that you'd like to say to our listeners, all dozen of them?
Thanks for listening, all dozen. Bring in another dozen. We'll make it a couple of dozen,
This
right?
may win us a Marconi Award. It's good
good
I don't
broadcasting.
even know if that's how that works, but we're going to win some kind of award with this podcast.
Good podcasting. Good podcasting. No, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Greg, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it so much, and it was like the best time I've ever had in my entire life
Yeah,
up to
okay.
now.
This is the best
All right,
podcast
good.
we've ever done. Trust me.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Greg.
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for everyone listening to segment 2 of the podcast there with Greg Kerr. We appreciate him coming out and hanging out with us and giving us a lot of information about his career and just fantastic information on the JFK assassination. That was incredible.
Look, guys, we want to do more of this stuff where we interview local people that are notable and interesting. Greg was awesome. I don't know that we could ever get another podcast to be better than the one we had Greg on. But if you guys know someone that's notable around here, famous, local celebrity, and they want to talk to us, please let us know, or just request. We'll try to reach out to them. Please hit us up on Twitter or on Facebook or YouTube, and we will do our very, very best to find them and put them on the podcast.
Yeah, we just want to thank everybody for paying attention to what we do here. We know everybody enjoys coming out on Sundays and playing flag football, and we appreciate everyone taking the time to come out and play flag football. Playoffs are right around the corner. It's the best time of the year. And I hope everybody enjoys the season, and let's go win a championship.
Yeah, let's go. All right, so have a good day. Be nice to each other, and Troy, go ahead.
Good luck.